Has it really been nearly 7 years?
It's not exactly a secret that I love Steven Universe. I mean, hell, I've made a top 10 moments video for every season of the show, not that all of them are that great anymore, and that is because the show has meant a lot to me. It's been one of the shows in the last decade that I've enjoyed the most and looked the most forward to new content from, and talking about it gave it one of my first real noticeable subscription bumps on this very channel. So yeah, it has meant a lot to me in a lot of ways.
I still remember not having heard about the show at all, but running into Art of Amethyst and message boards and pondering who this character was exactly. Something about her design was just really striking to me. Then I found out about the show and, well, I ended up binging all 14 or so available episodes at the time in one sitting.
At the time, I was going to a school that turned out not to be everything I'd hoped it would be. I was living on my own, far away from most of my friends, and had next to no money to speak of. And ahead of me laid the emotional fallout of some unfortunate things from my own childhood. So finding a show that had such a positive outlook on life while still dealing with very negative feelings, but doing so in a fantasy setting I found really appealing, that was a huge comfort to me.
And I know for a fact that as it grew and gained more and more of an ability to tackle more things, it has also meant a lot to many groups whose struggles outweigh mine considerably. It hasn't been perfect, no show ever is, but it struck a special chord with me and many others and has no doubt had an impact on animated television.
So sure, watching it end is definitely bittersweet. Bitter because it's over, but sweet because it did what it set out to do and gave me many things to look back on fondly. And yes, that includes the season titled Future.
For a long time, I was unclear on whether the show would continue at all after season 5 in the movie. So when I heard the news of a season that specifically dealt with what happens after the happily ever after, I was excited to see where they'd take it. And damn, did it still deliver some choice moments.
And that's why we're here for this video. So let's get together and take a look at my top 10 favorite moments from the latest Steven Universe season one last time. Okay, so to put it mildly, this season was full of heavy stuff. It dealt with a lot of negative bottled up emotions and the toll that trauma takes on a character over time. But before we dig into any of that, let's start the list off light.
With a horrifying domestic abuse analogy.
Oh!
No, but seriously, the core story being told here is about very, very serious things that I have not experienced myself, and that it's not my place to describe how accurate or hard-hitting it may or may not be. So mainly, I want to focus on what happens when our Pearl and the original Pink Pearl, now named Volleyball, acknowledge each other's takes on who Pink Diamond was in order to break out of a haywire Pearl rejuvenating machine.
You fused!
I don't have a big statement about this one. It's just a cool scene.
I just think it's a cool moment and a great fusion design. Sometimes that's all that needs to be said. Man, remember how exciting Change Your Mind was? And how cool it was to see Steven suddenly fuse with everybody? We finally got to see what would happen if he fused with Garnet and Pearl. And in my case, I was wildly confused about the latter.
Now, don't get me wrong, I did not dislike Rainbow Quartz 2.0 in the slightest. I just kind of didn't get it.
Steven plus Pearl making a masculine Mary Poppins just seemed kind of random to me. More so than freaking Sunstone somehow, and that's despite her being a living Sonic Says segment in all the best worst ways possible. But then very special episode rolled around, and I got to see Rainbow playing around with everyone's favorite creepy kid, Onion.
So what about this scenario made the design click for me? Why, a song, of course! I gotta have at least one song on these lists. It's like my thing by now.
Stick by stick, the little blackbird builds a nest. A mess to some, but the little blackbird isn't stressed. Stick by stick, the little blackbird builds a nest. And then he naps, cause even blackbirds need to rest.
Blackbird is just a lovely song, alright? I mean, it's so catchy and sweet.
I mean, it kinda makes me wanna get up and start organizing my shelves.
Around. And when you laugh, it is my favorite sound. And that's what life is all about.
But seriously, this song, a wonderful homage to A Spoonful of Sugar from the Mary Poppins film, made me realize why this design makes perfect sense for a Steven and Pearl fusion. It's a combination of all the best aspects of Pearl's motherly qualities, minus the complete OCD, and the all-loving playful nature of Steven that is still hiding somewhere under all the bubbling issues he faced in this season. The two of them combined basically makes the world's ultimate babysitter, and I love everything about that. Steven Universe was, the way I see it, a show that was always evolving in some way, at least after the first half of Season 1. While it never strayed too far from the core, watching Season 1 after all we have seen in the later seasons is like looking at a completely different show. And I'm not just referring to the character models.
Basically, time passed, characters grew, and the series changed with them. Now that's not new or unique to Steven Universe exactly, but it is very fun to take a look back and see how much has changed. And that's exactly what Snow Day did.
With Steven having grown up a lot and taken on many more responsibilities, too many really, the Gems see an opportunity to relive some of the old days when a snowstorm leaves them off work for the day. But their way of doing so includes attempting to sway Steven with a lot of the childish interest he started to grow out of, which naturally annoys him.
But can we really blame them? Any parent will tell you they feel like their child grew up overnight, and to the Gems, who are thousands of years old, and who have only recently started to understand the concept of aging, this must have felt like a split second.
The more Steven fights their coddling, the more persistent the Gems get, until eventually they bring back an old favorite gag, Steven Tag. And so begins a hilarious and action-packed episode full of great moments. From just the over-the-top nature of the game as it gradually gets out of hand, to Pearl finally shapeshifting, which shows that she's growing out of her previous issues, to Steven finally spilling his feelings, well, some of them. This is just a great episode.
Much like the Thanksgiving episode and the wedding, this is one of those episodes that really puts it into perspective just how much the show has grown.
And it makes you remember how long ago it was that Steven Universe was just a show about a young boy who desperately wanted to hang out with his 3 cool moms. A major criticism of the original show, movie included, was just how easily the Diamonds seemed to get off once reformed. For a bunch of galaxy-spanning tyrants who conquered and destroyed Lord knows how many worlds and kept up a thousands of years long cycle of abuse between each other and their subjects, it seemed like all it took to turn them around was a slap on the wrist, and that their efforts to do better in the movie were just them keeping up appearances to earn Steven's approval.
And while I would argue that you have to keep things such as pacing in mind, as well as the fact that Steven Universe is very much about an ideal world where people can be forgiven and change, yeah, I do agree to a certain extent. It did come a little easy.
That's why it's a real treat to see what the Diamonds have been up to in Homeworld Bound when a frightened Steven seeks them out for help. I mean, they turn out to not be very helpful to him, but we get to see that they aren't just resting on their laurels and patting themselves on the back for supposedly changing. They're doing active work to reverse the damage they've done. To the best of their ability, anyway. I gotta say, I appreciate the acknowledgement. But of course, things go south very fast when Steven goes to White Diamond. Apparently, she has learned to let others take over her body rather than force her will upon others, and uses it as a sort of therapy method to let struggling Gems feel powerful and get to properly look at and speak to themselves in order to work out deeper issues.
Unfortunately, Steven's issues are a little too specific for this to work, and seeing himself as a diamond after everything he's been through basically sets off an emotional chain explosion in his mind. And to say the least, the results aren't pretty.
I'm a diamond. This is the last thing I needed to see. I don't want to be you. I don't want to be anything like you. She's the one who should be afraid.
Oh, looks like someone's not quite forgiven after all. This deep-seated resentment takes a turn for the truly horrifying in what seems to be half hallucination as Steven butts his head on a pillar. Now, is this solely self-harm? Is it him genuinely trying to kill White in a moment of rage? Is it him attempting to physically attack a side of himself that he fears? There are many theories. Whatever it is, it's horrifying and tragic, and it makes it crystal clear that Steven can no longer claw his way out of his current mental state on his own. And that makes it one of this season's strongest moments. Now, Steven Universe didn't take long to show signs that there was more going on than just kid hangs out with superpowered alien ladies. There were plenty of times even early on where shit got dark and contemplative or hinted at a bigger story. But to me, Mirror Gem and Ocean Gem was the moment the show undeniably got real all of a sudden. But as I watched Lapis, a literally broken person, steal the world's oceans in a misguided attempt to go home to the only world she knew, I always wondered why she in particular was so absurdly powerful compared to other gems.
Because she never gave me the vibe that she was a gem authority or some kind of giant supervillain or anything, but here she was spreading global chaos. And most of her later appearances made it very clear that if there was one gem who was not to be fucked with, it was Lapis. But the show never told us why. At least not until this episode rolled around.
See, after all the reveals about the both restrictive and destructive nature of gem kind and the reformation of the Empire as a whole, Steven and Lapis learn of 2 other Lapis gems causing a ruckus on other planets.
It turns out there's a very good reason why Lapis gems are so strong. They're terraformers.
Their purpose in Gem Society is, or rather was, to basically bulldoze entire planets to prepare them for colonization. Man, that explains a lot! These 2, however, never stopped doing that. And despite some passionate singing from our Lapis, they aren't exactly easily swayed.
Which leads to a brief but pretty badass fight scene.
But awesome as it is, the fight itself isn't the most important thing if you ask me. It's that this is one of the few fights in the series that addresses one issue that Steven Universe has received criticism for rarely acknowledging. The fact that you can't reach everybody. That not everybody wants to change or work to make things better. But also that it's absolutely worth it to keep trying for the sake of those that do. Steven Universe is known for tackling big emotions and personal issues framed in a fantasy context. Despite it being about an alien species and the fallout of a 1,000-year-old war, and despite the series having a fair few fight scenes, it is not an action fighting series.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't deliver when it wants to.
There are 2 times in this series where Steven, the all-loving hero that we know, decides to fight the violent, rough Jasper, who has attempted to kill him and those he loves several times. And both of them lead to great fight scenes, even if the circumstances are very different for each of them. The first time, it's an attempt to reach out to someone still resisting the change that has happened, and who refuses to find a purpose beyond that which she was created for. It's Steven yet again attempting to communicate with someone, but this time trying to do so on their terms, even though it's with a method that makes him uncomfortable.
And the second time, well...
You're right, Jasper. I have been holding back.
The second time, it's Steven trying to find an outlet for all the negative feelings that have plagued him for the entire season, but doing so by plunging into it head first, far too deep, and far too fast. It's the opposite extreme, and one he only realizes does not help him once it leads to one of the biggest mistakes of his life. It's also possibly the most action-packed, balls-to-the-wall, unapologetic, and badass fight scene the show has yet offered.
And hey, it got the series' 2 soft people to shut up for a couple seconds.
Both fights are glances at sides of Steven's psyche we hadn't seen up until that point, at 2 very different stages of his downward emotional spiral. And both of them kick ass in their own way.
Guys, please go to the doctor if you're not feeling well. That includes mentally. That includes therapists and psychiatrists. I know not everybody has the same options when it comes to these things, but please try your best. Not for anyone else's sake, but for your own.
Steven hasn't for his entire life up until this episode, when the toll his unexplored feelings are having on him start affecting him physically, and Connie finally forces him to see her mother, Priyanka, and get a checkup. At first, it's all played for laughs. We get to see Steven being naive about doctors, and Priyanka's no-nonsense medical professionalism is pitted against the fairly random and weird nature of gem physiology. And to put it bluntly, that shit's kind of hilarious.
But it gets very serious very fast when Priyanka starts questioning all the things that Steven has been through, and whether or not he has allowed himself to process any of it.
When humans are in crisis, the brain releases the hormone cortisol. Your heart races, your muscles tense. I think all these experiences have been subjecting your body to a harmful amount of stress, and that's affecting your ability to respond to new forms of stress in a healthy way. You've been dealing with genuine threats from such a young age. Your body is now responding to minor threats as if your life were in danger.
The result of having all this dumped on him all of a sudden is Steven reacting with what I can only describe as the gem version of an emotional breakdown. It's a frightening sight, and even if it is obviously exaggerated, it probably feels all too familiar to many people. I have seen some discussions on whether or not this blunt, direct scientific explanation of trauma and stress is the right way to convey these things to the kids that may be watching the show. Personally, I prefer to appreciate that it's addressed at all, considering how few shows, even though supposedly targeted at adults, actually emphasize the importance of seeking help.
Whenever serious subjects come up on this channel, I always say I don't want to bore you guys with my life story. And I don't, we're here to have fun, right? But take the following from someone who has spent a huge chunk of his adult life thinking, and still finds himself thinking, that every setback in life, every goal not reached, every rejection is actual evidence that they don't deserve the space they take up on the planet. Even if it takes a long time, even if you had to go through several therapists, even if you think your issues are nothing compared to the things that other people have gone through, even if things get worse before they get better, and I'm telling you now, they might, taking that first step and asking for help is immeasurably important.
In Steven's case, we can visibly see his turmoil, but real life people aren't that lucky. You may be swelling just as badly as him without anyone around you knowing, even yourself. It can be helped, but you have to seek it out.
So please, seek out help if you need it. Life is entirely too complicated to handle on your own.
So, okay, the hospital visit didn't exactly go perfectly, but at least it brought some of Steven's current problems to light to the people around him. And Greg, being the ever-supportive dad, rushes to his son's side to try and be with him and cheer him up, eventually suggesting a good old-fashioned father-son road trip.
Cue the Goofy movie references.
Just being out on the open road.
And then cue the part where everything backfires horribly.
In fairness, their road trip does start off super cute. Just seeing Steven be so excited over something as simple as a road trip warms the heart, and the trip itself looks like a lot of fun. Or at least it does right until they start talking about Greg's past, and end up breaking into what turns out to be his parents' home in order to find the thing that made him decide to be Mr. Universe back in the day. Which turns out to be a frankly hilarious David Bowie pastiche.
Looking for your place in the universe. Don't you know the universe is looking too? Welcome to the party, Mr. Universe. We're so glad we are a part of you.
According to Greg, this is what inspired him to break out of what he saw as oppressive suburban monotony and figure himself out. And surely it will do the same for Steven, right? But Steven, whose childhood has been, shall we say, less than conventional, is not amused.
I wish I could have grown up in a house like that.
No, you don't.
Maybe your parents weren't so bad. Maybe they gave you curfews and chaperones and meatloaf for a reason.
Steven, you don't know what they were like.
They can't be worse than Mom's family. I went halfway across the galaxy for them, and this was right here?
And just to rub salt in the wound when the argument turns ugly, Greg ends up completely ignoring Steven's real issue with the whole situation, thus shattering his son's view of him in the process.
This is an important moment. Greg's parenting, which up until now has been played a little bit as a joke, is suddenly questioned in ways it has never been before. Now, this has led some people to call him a terrible person and an awful father, but I disagree with that. I still say Greg is a great dad. But good and great is not equal to perfect. We can't forget this part of the argument.
I grew up in a van. I never went to school. I'd never been to the doctor until 2 days ago.
Steven, you're a gem. You're not like other kids.
Now, that is a good point, and there are lots of good reasons to keep Steven away from normal neighborhoods and schools. Think of some of the gem-powered shenanigans of early Steven Universe. Would you really want things like that happening around regular human children? The thing is, that's not what Greg was focusing on. Instead, his decisions when it came to raising Steven were based on his own hang-ups with a lack of personal freedom, causing him to lean into the other extreme.
That doesn't mean he doesn't love his son. I mean, watch the show. The love is clearly there. The love is clearly genuine. This doesn't tarnish some of Greg's better moments for me. But it does show an underlying selfishness that has had ripple effects on his child. Much the same way that Rose's did.
And let's remember that, like Steven, we really only know half the story. Those letters he finds in there don't look opened. We don't know anything about the extended family, and we don't know for certain if Greg's parents were just strict or outright emotionally abusive. And now we never truly will.
This isn't a great moment because it's some big reveal that Greg was a horrible monster the whole time. No, nothing like that. It's a great moment because it shows that to someone, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, and that one person's perceived paradise can very easily be another person's hell.
There's no immediate easy answer to which approach would have been the right one for Steven. There's just the unfortunate consequences of a choice made half in spite, half in ignorance, and half in genuine good faith, And I, for one, really appreciate that ambiguity.
Well, Sugar and crew, you did it! You broke the boy!
You piled so many of other people's issues on a young teenage boy expecting him to fix it, and put him through so many traumatizing experiences that a complete breakdown was inevitable. And despite everyone's best efforts to be present once they finally do realize something is wrong, the result isn't pretty. Or, well, I mean, on a design standpoint, it's rad as hell and the giant nerd in me loves the Godzilla vibe Steven gives off, absolutely. But then you remember that this is a teenager who has mentally snapped and it's suddenly not as rad anymore.
So of course we have to subdue the beast before it does any damage. So time for every character to swoop in and stop the monster!
With a hug and a plea to remember that people love him and will do everything they can to do for him what he has spent years doing for them. And thankfully, it works.
I've seen some people complain that yet again a major threat in Steven Universe was solved with a hug and a good cry and a talk about your feelings. And I do understand that complaint to a certain degree. I mean, if an actual giant monster started stomping around the coastline, yeah, I don't think kissing it on the forehead would work. Not every situation in life can be solved with a talk, that's absolutely true. But my response to this complaint is, you're watching Steven Universe, man. What the hell did you expect?
If you're sitting there demanding that a show like Steven Universe, which has always unapologetically been about loving and understanding people even if they appear strange and destructive, should end with a violent takedown of a giant monster, then I'm sorry to say it, but I feel like you're the one putting your ass within slapping range and asking for reasons to get pissed off.
There's no shortage of shows where the heroes win the day by beating an irredeemable villain into the ground, but Steven Universe isn't one of them. This is basically the one way it could have ended. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the way it should end. And now it's the time for the part that everyone was dreading. The finale. The final goodbye.
After all is said and done, Steven is ready to move on with his life. Which, in this case, means moving away from Beach City and seeking out other, hopefully less traumatic experiences in order to grow. With a little help from a therapist, thank God.
There is a whole plot here about the gems trying not to look sad that Steven is leaving, but then breaking down at the end anyway, but I don't really want to focus on that.
I just want to focus on the finality of it all. From a wonderful callback to one of the series' first iconic scenes, to each individual goodbye and parting gift to every one of his friends. From the funny...
Oh no, am I smothering you? I get it.
Hey, Smith.
You better kiss your high scores goodbye!
What?
And say goodbye to your save files, too!
to the sweet and thoughtful...
What the? 142 pieces? 60 crayons? 24 oil pastels? It even has watercolors?
Do you like it?
I love it!
and to the utterly heart-wrenching...
Where am I going to find another Steven as good as you, huh? I like this one so much!
Hey, what the hell? Why is the B team getting all the best goodbye scenes?
Oh, I love that ukulele! I'll never play anything else!
Thank you!
But seriously, the show may end with a trope we've seen maybe a few times too many lately, that being the heroes we come to love parting ways in the name of personal growth. And it may be schmaltzy, saccharine, and painfully predictable when it all comes down to it, but that kind of sweetness is perfect for this show, and I wouldn't have wanted it any other way.
And so a 7-year journey comes to an end for me and for millions of other people. Rebecca and her entire crew worked really hard and delivered something wonderful that many of us will never forget, and I can't wait to see what a lot of them come up with next. So, thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.
Oh man, it's kind of surreal to be making the last one of these videos. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you don't mind the wait and that you liked what you saw. If you did, don't forget to scroll down and hit the like button, and tell us all some of your own favorite Steven Universe future moments in the comment section. I know there's plenty of great things I ended up leaving out. As always, I want to extend a special thanks to Silvermoon Ravenwolf, Warren Miller, and all my other patrons. You guys are wonderful, and I really appreciate it. If you want to support my work as well, you can find links to my Patreon, my Ko-fi, and my TeePublic pages in the description below. And if you just found this channel, don't forget to subscribe for many more videos about cartoons, comic books, movies, video games, and other nerdy stuff in the future. See you then, everybody, and bye for now.